So we're starting Genesis. Genesis is the Greek name from the Hebrew name Bereshith.
It's time to change your world. It's time to let it go. The things you used to think, the things you used to know, they don't help you anymore. It's time to change your mind. If it's peace you want to find.
This is Kurt Kaikonen, pastor of Calvary Chapel, Waterford, at your neighborhood church. Today on Change Your World, we'll be in the book of Genesis. So grab your Bible. We'll be starting in chapter 25.
It's time to change your world. You need to let it go.
So now Isaac, he's afraid of these Philistines, and he's afraid of them taking his wife and killing him for Rebekah, because Rebekahs are usually pretty good looking. But he shouldn't be afraid, because you see, God had just appeared to him and told him to dwell there. And he just revealed all these promises that he was going to do in his life. But instead of believing God and trusting him, it's easier to lie, because his dad did. And this is not like it's a generational curse. But see, sometimes children, they can justify to themselves that it's okay to be like their parents. Like, dad smokes, so I can smoke. Or dad drinks, so I can drink. Or dad cheats on his taxes. Or dad lies when it's important. Because children will imitate their fathers in the good, the bad, and the ugly. And they'll even think they're cool doing it, like Clint Eastwood. But see, Isaac's lie is worse than his dad's, because Rebekah's not even his half-sister. Rebekah's his second cousin, or his first cousin once removed. So Isaac's excuse to Abimelech is a total lie. And Abimelech catches him when he's looking out the window and he sees him playing lovey-dovey with Rebekah. And he doesn't kick him out for that, but he yells at him. And then he threatens his own people to leave the man alone and his wife alone, or he'll kill them. Because they didn't really have a problem killing people. But we can see God's faithfulness to Isaac even when Isaac lies. And the truth is, we see that in our own lives. When we do something, God remains faithful even through our failures. So now Isaac, he's staying in that land, and he starts being a farmer, and he plants this crop. And God prospers him, because God prosper Isaac everywhere he goes. And he prospers him 100-fold. And that's the most you can prosper. Because if you remember the parables of Jesus, it said some 30, some 60, some 100. And he's talking about a return for his planting. So 100-fold is the most you can get. And even though Abimelech didn't kick him out of the land for lying, he's going to kick him out of the land for being too prosperous in Abimelech's land. Because this land belongs to Abimelech. And Abimelech and everybody else, they're envious. And Isaac, he's not like his dad. He doesn't argue with him. He just moves. And everywhere he moves, God blesses him. And he finds water, and he finds well. And he finds an artesian well with running water, which was very valuable, because that means that with an artesian well with running water, the water's always fresh. But the Philistines take it, and then they take the next well. And then he moves again, and then they take that one, and then he moves again, and they take that one. And so it tells us that what Isaac is doing is he's going around the land, because this is the land where his father was, and he's digging up his dad's old wells. But he didn't stay there really long, and he went back up to Beersheba. And if you remember, Beersheba is where Abraham, he planted that Tasmach tree, and he stayed up there a long time. That's where Isaac was actually born. Now God comes to Isaac again, and he tells him not to fear. And that's what God always tells people that are his when they're afraid. He always tells them not to fear. And nowadays, there's a lot of people, and our people, we're afraid because of all the things that are going on in our world. But as us, as believers, we're told, just like he was, not to be afraid. And we're also secure, just like he was, because Isaac was secure. And with us, it's because Jesus tells us, because he tells us that he's overcome the world, and that he sees us, and that he hears us, and that he loves us. For Isaac, God tells Isaac, it's for Abraham's sake that I'm doing this. But for us, we're told by God that it's for Jesus' sake. And so now Isaac, he builds an altar because he's like his dad. And now he starts calling on God. And he finds a well there and he settles in. And then that same Abimelech that just kicked him out, he comes up from the south and he comes with his friends and the commanders of his army. And now he wants a treaty with Isaac. And it's the same exact place that Abraham made a treaty with these same exact people, the Hittites, 100 years before that. Because you see, these people, they can see the greatness of Isaac's God. And they can see that God is blessing Isaac and everything in Isaac's life. Just like they saw the greatness of Abraham's God, because if you remember, his name was a mighty prince, which literally meant a prince with God. So they could see that God worked in their lives. And that's what people should see in our lives. They should see God's greatness. They should see the blessings of God because they were his witnesses, and that's what we are. We're his witnesses, and the truth is God blesses us. Our lives shouldn't look like those around us that are not believers. They should see a difference in our lives because of God, and they should see it in good ways. They shouldn't see us as being different just because we act awkward. We shouldn't be arguing over wells, or we should be arguing over our property. But they should see us looking to heaven for our blessings, even when they try to take our stuff away. Instead of looking around at our neighbors and looking at our neighbor's stuff and trying to take their things. So Isaac, he now makes him a feast. And in this culture, you don't eat with your enemies. You only eat with your friends. So these guys, they had this feast. They had a great time, and they're eating and drinking. And maybe they were teasing Isaac and saying, yeah, you and your sister wife over there, you don't know. But the next morning, they got up and they made these oaths of loyalty. And after they left, Isaac's servants, they find that old well because the Philistines had stopped up all at Abraham's well. And I don't know if it's a coincidence, but I don't think it is, because I think it's what it is they made the oath and then God blesses him again. And he finds that well and he gives it the same name. He gives it that name of Beersheba, which means the oath of seven. And that's where they lived for a long time. So Isaac and Rebekah and the boys, they all settled in there. And we know that they lived there for at least 40 years because now we see Esau and he's 40 years old and he's starting to marry the local girls. And these are the girls who serve idols. They serve the idols of that land, which means they were sensual and it means that they were lewd. But Esau, he doesn't care because he likes that world, because he's godless and he's a fornicator. But his parents, they hate it because they love this boy Esau, even though he's not a believer, and especially his father Isaac, because he still, even at this point, is still planning on giving Esau the real birthright, the blessings that came from Abraham. Even though Isaac has known the whole time since before Esau's birth, it was to go to Jacob. And he's probably aware of that little transaction between the boys, with that bowl of soup. But Isaac, he didn't agree to that deal. And he's the patriarch, and he's the father. So he's going to be the one who says, which goes on in his home. Or does he? So Isaac, he's old, and he tells Esau that he doesn't know the days of his death. Now Isaac, he's well over 100 years old. He would have turned 100 when his boys Isaac and Esau turned 40. Because remember, Esau, he was married at 40, and it's been a few years since then. Martin Luther said that Isaac was 137 years old at this time. And if that's true, Isaac would live for another 43 years. And so he's old and he's blind, but he's not dying yet. But he has everybody convinced that he is. And old Isaac, he's been disabled for a while. And you notice, the Bible never teaches that being blind or having infirmities and diseases, that they have any bearing on how much God loves us. Because Isaac here, he's God's chosen one. He is the son of his promise. He's the one that God picked. But being chosen and being old and blind, it doesn't keep a man from disobeying God. Because Isaac knows that Jacob is God's chosen, and what he's attempting to do is against God's will. Because Isaac, he's secretly going to try to dispense that blessing, and that's the blessing of the birthright, to Esau. And now, when I look at this family, and to me, it seems to be kind of like how we would think of a frontier cowboy type family. It's kind of like a Western, kind of like a cowboy movie. And in your mind, you might have to trade those horses in the movie for camels here. But these people, they're living in a type of wilderness, and they're raising livestock. So they're like cowboys. And they're living among their neighbors who are of a total different culture. And they're kind of like the Indians in the wild, wild West. They were just a different type of pagans. So this is kind of like a Mideastern cowboy movie. And even though it seems like they're living a life with not a lot of adversity from the outside, and they're living in relative peace with their neighbors, the Canaanites at this time, there wasn't a lot of peace that was going on inside this family. This family's messed up, and everyone is plotting against everyone. And everyone had their favorites. And it was like a real-life reality TV show. It was like Survivor. And everyone, they each had made their alliances. And each of these family members, they each wanted their own way. And you have to keep in your mind and remember that this is God's chosen family. This is his people. This is the people that he's called out of all the nations of the world. So this should give us a little hope in raising our kids and our families. Now, at this point, we've already seen where Esau, he had traded his birthright for a bowl of stew. And so now here we see his father Isaac, and he's just about to do the same thing. He's going to try to give away God's blessing for a nice savory dish of stewed venison, because he wants to feed his flesh so that his soul can bless his favorite son. So here we have God's chosen, Isaac, and he's openly rebelling against God's will. Because Isaac knew that birthright and blessing, they both belonged to the youngest before the twins were ever born. Isaac knew God had chosen Jacob. And this should have been easy for Isaac to understand, because God had chosen him, and Isaac was the second born. And he was chosen instead of Ishmael, Abraham's firstborn. And that wasn't Abraham's choice, because if you remember, Abraham tried to talk God into choosing Ishmael. And this isn't Isaac's choice either. It's God's choice, because it's God's plan for the whole world. And now here you have Isaac's wife, Rebekah, and she's the love of his life, but she doesn't trust Isaac's spiritual leadership anymore, because she also knows that this blessing belongs to Jacob, because God told her, and he told her himself. But instead of her trusting God and believing his promises that God will work it all out, she conspires against her husband. And just like Isaac is physically blind, he's also blind to the extremes that his wife is willing to go to guarantee this birthright for her favorite son. She wants him to have that blessing. And Rebekah, Well, Rebekah, she knew everything that was going on in that house. She's always had her ear pressed up against the tent wall to the point where she'd have to go around and wash her ear prints off the tent. And she heard this private meeting between Isaac and Esau, where Isaac told his intent that he was secretly going to give Esau the blessing. So Rebekah, she's not your typical mild-mannered Midwestern housewife. And she's not submitted to her husband's authority in this family. And she's tricky. And she has a nature that's not much unlike her son, heel catcher, Jacob. And she's a bit like her brother, Laban, the thief. So on that side of the family, you had to watch it because they were a clever bunch. And they had some very serious issues going on. Because when she develops her plot, it's calculated and it's planned with precision. Rebekah, she leaves nothing to chance. So Esau, he walks in to visit his old dad because he's dad's favorite. And they have this bond, just him and dad. They're buddies. And dad tells him secretly, and nobody else knows this, but he's still going to give Esau the family blessing. But this birthright and blessing, they're both connected. And Esau, he knows that he already sold it. But he likes to think of them of being separate. But they weren't separate. They weren't his to claim. And everybody knew it, and it was obvious to all of them. And when Esau sold it, he didn't care one bit about the things of God. Esau never had a place for God in his life. And he's already disqualified himself in any type of spiritual blessing from God. He's already married 2 pagan wives, and he has spent his whole life worshiping in the behaviors of their culture. He's a fornicator. He was involved in their worship activities before he was ever married. And God's blessing to the world, and through whom he would bring his own son, they were not going to come through some godless pagan unbelievers. And the only reason Esau even cares now is that he now realizes all those material blessings and benefits that would come in this blessing. And later on, when he realizes that he lost it, he'll cry like a little baby who lost his candy. But he will never repent, because instead of looking at himself, at what he's done, he's going to blame Jacob. He'll never take responsibility for his own actions. But right now, he's excited because Dad's going to give him the blessing anyways, because Dad likes him better. And he's thinking, ha, 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 Jacob, now who is the heel catcher? But Isaac, he could bless Esau all day long, and it wouldn't mean a thing, because Isaac, he has no right to pass down God's blessings. Only God does. So Rebekah, she conspires the betrayal, and it's good. And in this plan, she's left nothing to chance. And she thinks, my husband's blind. I only have to get past only 4 of his senses. And now it's like mission impossible. Bum, 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 bum. Nothing will be as it seems. And it will work. Because you don't mess with Laban's sister, and you don't mess with my favorite son. Well, we will first have to get past Isaac's sense of taste. But I know how Esau makes his meat. I know the spices. I know the textures. I can make goat taste like venison because Rebekah, she's an excellent cook. And anyways, he's so old, he probably can't taste the difference. So the first hurdle is solved. Check. All right. The second hurdle, the sense of smell. Oh, yes, I have Esau's dirty clothes. And I have no idea why this mom would have Esau's dirty clothes, because is she really doing his laundry? Like, he's way over 40 years old, and he has his own 2 wives, but she has them, and she's going to make use of them. And I know that Isaac, when he smells them, he's going to say how good they smell, like a field blessed by the Lord. But I can't imagine those clothes smelling good in any way. A stinky grown man tromping around the woods, hunting all day. It sounds like they would smell a little bit organic to me. But anyways, Jacob, he will smell like Esau. So the second hurdle is solved. Check. And now there's the sense of touch. Well, the only places that will be exposed will be his hands and his neck. And the clothes will cover everything else because they both have hair and they both have beards. And Isaac won't be able to see the color of Esau's bright red hair. So Rebekah figures she can use those goat skins from the goats she's making the fake venison from because she's so resourceful. She's kind of like a Martha Stewart. And this kind of makes you think, what did Esau look like? Was he like some kind of Sasquatch or like some Neanderthal caveman with hair all over his body? But that's what girls liked back then. And so Rebekah, she overcomes that third hurdle, the sense of touch. Check. And now this fourth hurdle, well, this is the toughest hurdle. And it's the sense of hearing. Because with Isaac's blindness, his sense of hearing, it may be heightened. And even though they're twins, they sound nothing alike. But if Jacob, if he can do his best, and he doesn't say too much, and we can give Isaac some wine with that meal. So if we can subdue his senses, we may have a chance. And we just might pass it off. So that fourth sense of hearing, check. So now Rebekah, she finds Jacob, and she tells him what she heard, and then she tells him what she's thinking. And she says, but we're going to have to be quick, because Esau is hunting now. And Jacob, he knows this is wrong, and that he should have no part of it. But he's not concerned with being wrong. He's only concerned about getting caught. And he wants that birthright because he bought it. And he wants that blessing because that's part of it. But he doesn't want to be cursed, not by his dad or not by God. Because Jacob, he has a heart for God, even though he's kind of a deceptive kind of guy. And the only part of Jacob's concern about his mother's plan is that hairy part. And his mom explains to him how they'll get around it. But to get him to seal the deal, to get Jacob's commitment to this deception, Rebekah says, let the curse be on me. And wow. And that did it. That's all it took. That's all he needed to hear. He needed the assurance that there would be no price for him to pay. But Jacob, he did pay a price. And so did Rebekah. And with Rebekah, although it doesn't say here that she was cursed, the price she paid was that she would never see her favorite son ever again. Because of this deception, Jacob, he'll be gone for over 20 years, living in the fear of his brother Esau.
Let it go.
Thanks for listening to Change Your World. Change Your World is an outreach of Calvary Chapel, Waterford, and your neighborhood church. If you're listening to Change Your World in the Detroit metro area, why don't you join us for church this Sunday? Our service time is 10 a.m. at Calvary Chapel, Waterford, 183 South Winding Drive, Waterford, Michigan. We're competing with the Catholics. It's only an hour. All the donuts you can eat, and you don't have to believe a thing we say, but it could change your world.
You need to change your world.
The rest of today's message can be heard at yourneighborhoodchurch.org. So check us out and download the app. And until next week, remember,